Welcome to Slated for Tomorrow. This is where we meet inspiring individuals who have great superpowers to shape the future. I'm your host, Sandy Sharma, and I'm joined by my co-host.
Hey everyone, I'm James Archery. We're happy to have you here, and we have a special guest. His name is Michael Roberts, who's the CMO of MetLife. Michael, it's awesome to have you here.
It's great to be here, guys.
And Michael, you're joining us from New York today.
I am in Midtown Manhattan.
Nice. Well, thanks for being here with us. So let's start a little bit about your life story. Tell us about your history, how you started in your professional career, and how things have gone. We'd just love to hear more about that.
I spent most of the first half of my career in strategy, and was always fascinated at all of the tentacles of an organization that come together kind of in the process of developing strategy and then executing strategy. And the other place where I saw that was the case in organizations was in marketing, with a unique kind of benefit over or advantage over strategy, which was, the direct connection to the customer. And so, I wanted to be in a place in the company where we had levers to impact, so many different aspects of the outcomes for the company, but directly connected to the customer. And so marketing was a very logical place for me to move to.
Wait, so you were first a strategist and you had worked with marketing departments and you realized that marketing has the potential impact for that. Is that correct?
Yeah. So it's been an interesting journey for me, James. So I didn't start anywhere close to where I am right now. My education was all in music. So I have an undergraduate in history and theory of music, and I have a master's degree in voice. I left school as a professional opera singer. And yes, that's the God's honest truth. I met a girl. I moved to New York to be an opera singer. We broke up. I lost the cats. I lost the piano. I lost the apartment in that breakup, and really, really needed to make some money. So I looked around and found a job in consulting. That's what happens when an opera singer needs cash. So I entered the world of consulting and became a strategist for the first half of my career. And I think the thing that I saw in strategy was how all of the tentacles of a company come together in order to create an outcome for clients and investors and employees and communities as well. And the other place I saw that happening was in marketing. And so when I saw the impact that marketing could have and all of the different aspects of the enterprise that come together with the support of marketing or through the support of marketing or led by marketing, I felt like that was a great place for me to make an impact, frankly. And really that was a lot of my passion, was really around impact. Impact for customers, impact for communities, impact for the teams that I'm working with, and ultimately in a few of the companies, impact for investors. We can come back to that if you're curious.
I love the fact that you didn't ever really lose your voice, if we will, theoretically. So where I'm going there, well, you're using your voice to impact people audibly, right? But then life changed and you adapted and you still were able to get your voice across as a strategist. And still doing your impact. And I love that idea where you need a three-dimensional view on things where life isn't linear, but you can still have your passion, which is to impact others. And it may not be in the direct thing that you thought you were going to go to school for. And you're an amazing example there. Sorry, Sadie, I wanted to call that out.
Stretch that out even more. In marketing, we talk about voice of customer, right? And we also have to talk about voice of reason. And I think that's kind of where, Michael, you kind of connected those two, because you said that in marketing, there is an opportunity for it, but most marketers don't do it. Even most strategy firms don't do outcomes, because the goal is, hey, I'll do my strategy piece and I'll disappear. marketers, I'll do my creative, brilliant thing and I'll disappear. But it's interesting that you saw reason to connect the two. So tell us more about what inspired it, because traditionally it doesn't really happen.
This is one of the things that has really come together in my current job. And so, our strategy at MetLife is very clear. And it's rooted in commitments to our customers, commitments to our employees, commitments to our investors, and commitments to our communities. And there's not a hierarchy. We made commitments to each one of those stakeholders, and those commitments are about the outcomes that we are going to deliver from those stakeholders. And so when the strategy is as clear as that, then alignment to outcomes becomes relatively straightforward, and provides a degree of clarity. Now, that's not always the clarity that we have as marketers in different companies. I think one of the things that I love about marketers and marketing in general is that, in the absence of strategy, we impute the strategy and then go execute. That's one of the best things about being in marketing is people get stuff out the door. People get stuff into market. And whether there's clarity of strategy or not, we figure it out. I think more and more that clarity has to be connected to specific outcomes for stakeholders. And in many cases, for a lot of companies, those outcomes need to be commercial outcomes. They need to be clear commercial outcomes for the different stakeholders. And I think as marketers, we are obligated to figure that out in a way that may not be the same as what was assumed we were delivering in the past. I think that is the future for marketers, is clear connection to commercial outcomes.
There's been some really awesome things happening in the marketing space, like Nintendo with their Zelda. Did you see how well they did? Like in the 3 days, sold 10 million copies and 700 million in revenue. But that wasn't a fluke, right? And marketing killed it there. And I think, so I made even a post on this on LinkedIn, and I'd love your thoughts on, give us some examples recently where you saw marketing done really well, but then also a misstep too, right? And you don't have to name names, obviously, because we don't want to throw stones at some people. You can, I'll say IBM wants one. But I would say, what's really cool about Nintendo is they played to their audience. They knew where their audience was going to be watching it. Twitch is where it would be consumed and demanded. So they marketed heavily to that section.
Yes.
Took direct feedback from the customer in the building of the product. Mm-hmm. So there was no shock. And so they built up anticipation of what to expect, right? Which I thought was really, really.
I'll take it a slightly different direction, because my sense is that, what we see from marketing masks some of the brilliance that marketers are kind of displaying that may be unseen. And so we tend to look at the most visible campaigns and then understand kind of what went right in that specific campaign. But I think a sustained contribution to commercial outcomes is not a single campaign. And I think the marketers who have figured out kind of how to have sustained contributions to commercial outcomes are the ones that are the most brilliant. I again, like as you and I have talked about before, I think creative is wildly important, but we don't create any value for any of the stakeholders unless we're interacting with the customer. And that means that channel becomes just as important. And if we don't know what to say and how to interact with the customer through that channel, then we fail, which means that data and analytics are incredibly important. And so I start there. I say, it's insights and analytics plus execution that's brought alive by creative, which makes brilliant marketing. And the creative, in the examples that we've talked about, is about finding the truth, the deep-seated human truth that touches people in a way that makes an impact on them. And I think that's how we should be judging marketing. We should start with the analytics and the insights as well as the execution. even though the thing that we see the most of is the creative.
Actually, you bring up a good point. This happens even in the startup world, right? You see this one unicorn and everybody says that's the recipe to success. But there's so much systemic work that is put in place in so many organizations. And if you can, as you said, watch the data and see what it's doing and continuously iterate, you keep learning. So I think the magical stories are important for inspiration, but you're calling out that the process and the rigor on focusing on outcomes and watching the data all the time is critical. I do want to go back to your strategy days and your marketing days. What inflection points inspired you to think like this? Or were you just born with it? It doesn't happen to everybody, Michael. Tell me what happened.
Not being trained as a marketer and then thrown into a marketing situation was a challenge. But it was even more challenging because of where I started in marketing. So I started in the engine room. My first kind of significant marketing job was running marketing operations and creative. And I'm a strategy guy who's got to manage creative resources. And I've got to understand how to, get Six Sigma quality out of direct mail. I mean, this is stuff that, takes a lot of time and expertise in order to get right. And so immediately I had to learn how stuff is made. Right. So that for me, gave me an appreciation for kind of all of the details that go into making something and delivering it to a client. And that for me was the best education. I had to learn kind of three different things. I had to learn kind of how the stuff was made and the processes. I had to learn how to make it better. But more importantly, I had to learn how to show respect for all of that work. That a lot of times doesn't get the respect. When we just look at the creative, the agency up front gets all of the glory, and there are people in the back room who are figuring out how to optimize 12 cells in a testing matrix, and that was what made the difference in the outcomes for the campaign. And we have to honor that work, and I think that influenced me significantly. In terms of my perspective on marketing. I went on to then lead digital and analytics as well in that same early experience, and it just reinforced my perspective about kind of where value is created in marketing, and it's across the entire life cycle.
It cannot just be you. There was somebody who's forcing those outcomes to happen. Because in early career, for a lot of us, some of us are just inspired. I want to get the outcome. But you had leadership or management or the company that you were in that also was focused on it, or was it just you? Because lots of times we don't find that, right? That you're being held accountable, you set to Six Sigma level outcomes and refinement. Now, talk to me. Whenever marketers say Six Sigma, I always think there is a problem.
Some of our audience, Michael, might not even be aware of what Six Sigma is. So
yeah.
You probably
So just very simply, it's the kind of the highest quality standard for execution. It means there are so few defects, per 1,000 that it's as close to perfection as you should aim to get in terms of quality. And then those are the sorts of things that I had to learn about and think about and try to achieve. I'll say, Sandy, to answer your question about kind of where that came from, I will say I had a mentor who was the CMO. She gave me the opportunity to try to figure it out, and did it in a way which gave me a lot of guidance and a lot of help, but also a lot of freedom. So I wasn't executing somebody else's playbook. I had guidance and a lot of help, but I got a chance to kind of create my own patterns. This is one of the other things that I think was really important about that early experience, and a little bit of an advantage I think I had and this may get to a little bit of the superpower question as well. A lot of times, what I've seen in marketing is that we pattern match, and so it goes back to that question, that the comments about, when we look at something that's great, how do we try to pattern match to get that greatness? What I have found in my marketing career is that, pattern matching only situations. And so I think one of the things that has made me kind of able to adapt to the different environments that I've been in is that, I have created the capability, to not assume patterns match, but to actually dig down into the details of the work. Because I've always been in the details of the marketing work, and then understand the texture of the problem I'm trying to solve, and then rebuild, leveraging patterns where they make sense, but also, finding new ways to think about things or new ways to do things. And I think that's been a bit of my superpower is being able to rebuild frameworks, and then importantly, as a leader, be able to communicate them effectively, so that it can drive the actual change.
So let me go. It kind of goes to my first part, but now you get my mind like, all right, somebody let's choose my 3 questions, and you help me figure out which one you want to answer. Okay. The first question was around managing and working with creatives, right? And being on the business side. And as you know, creatives have a very strong opinion because they are creative, and because they're passionate about what they're building, right? And they take ownership of that. And sometimes that butts heads with like, hey, this is
has to have a really strong culture, and have a strong purpose, and have an identity, and have a deep sense of pride in the work, and understand how they're contributing. And so establishing that the culture of the creative organization was really important. And I think there are lots of patterns around that. The patterns are slightly different between internal agencies and external agencies, and that's a really important distinction. And I got a lot of help from a guy named David Baker on that on some of those specific aspects of it. He was an amazing teacher in that space. In terms of managing creatives and the conflict, James, that you mentioned, one of the things that became a huge leverage point was two parts to it. It was establishing clarity of strategy, and so what is the brief, and then understanding how to evaluate creative against the brief, right? And so like that process takes a long time to get to a point where the brief can actually express something that is insightful and potentially even profound. And so that work has to get done. And then you have to actually understand how the brief becomes a rubric for the creative. And so it's nobody's opinion. It's, the N of one, opinions of senior people are, could go right out the window. Or a friend of mine calls it the hippos, the highest paid person in the room,
Oh my God, I brought that one. A hippo mean
I've heard that one before.
paid person in the room.
Yeah, there, and the question becomes, how does the creative match against the brief? Now, the way that we one of the ways we got there was we actually had to train the team how to present creative in that way. And so then it became ingrained.
Part of the
culture and part of the expectation of your skill set was to be able to present creative, within that framework. And so, that's not going to work for everybody, but it was effective in the situation and that we had.
Could you take an example there, Michael? Because I think I kind of know what you're saying. An example might just help it.
Yeah. So, if the brief says that, the killer truth that we're trying to get across is that financial independence is actually a team sport, right? And there's this tension between, the idea of independence and a team, and that in order to become financially independent, you have to have a team. Then what you do from a creative perspective has to actually, get that tension, into, kind of into action through, visuals and verbals. But that's not necessarily the way that, people who are trying to inspire, excellence in financial services and financial independence think about it. And so the idea of a picture of a team around a table, versus somebody being successful kind of on their yacht, is two very, very different perspectives on how this goes. And so you have to be able to, show that's the image of success that we want. Is collective, because that's on brand. It has a creative tension in it. It differentiates from the rest of the competition.
And even there, keeping the hippos aside, you test both, right? And you see what actually works, because then it's not about the person, the N equal to 1. It's what actually works, because that's where the humility comes in on looking at the data. And even though the creative might feel very passionate about the person on the yacht, and you might like it too, but when you push it out there, it may not work. And then you'll rethink it. Is that what you were, is that what you're saying?
That's exactly it. But I think, I would, in most cases, what I would try to do is avoid having the yacht even in the conversation. Because the yacht is not on brief. And so, there are always times when you need to test somebody because somebody says they like it really a lot. And, you kind of go with that from a practical perspective, but the yacht would never even come into the conversation if we're talking about strategy. The other thing we did was the brief was the thing that we started with and the strategy. And so that by the time creative was getting reviewed, the brief had been reviewed and refined and the strategy was clear and parts of the execution were clear. And so the creative came in as, okay, so this is the enabler of the commercial outcome. This is not the thing that's designed to get the commercial outcome. This is the enabler of the commercial outcome. And that also takes a lot of pressure off the creative. Like if the idea is all you have, then that's all people are going to focus on. But if you have a strategy, if you have a path towards execution, if you have a hypothesis about kind of where it will go next even, then the creative becomes the enabler instead of the only thing to focus on.
And then it's about iterating, and the brief evolves, the creatives evolve, the outcomes evolve when you learn. That's your cyclical thing, right?
And then it becomes an ongoing conversation about more ways to get at that commercial outcome versus
being fixed on the yacht, though all
exactly.
like the yacht.
Exactly right. I'm not against yachts, just to be clear.
Michael, so going back to the other one that I thought was be really helpful for the audience is you mentioned you had this great mentor, which was the CMO. Technically, you reported up to her, right?
I did. So Connie Weaver was the CMO of TIA when I took this job, and she was looking to build a strategy function within marketing that was focused on kind of applied competitive strategy. So more than just marketing strategy, but really competitive strategy. So we'd understand kind of where we sat kind of in the ecosystem and could help, drive influence kind of into the businesses based on a capability that she had envisioned. And so she said,
well, it's being very nuanced, but I want to make it, I'm going to get tactical for a second, very surgical, if you were. Were you like one line directly reporting to her, or you were multiple levels below?
So this is before I was even reporting to her. And so we had this conversation about this strategy function, and she said, what do you think about this? This is something that we've been working on. Could you help with this? And I was in a strategy role at the time, and I said, yeah, that would be amazing. I would love to do that. And then she said, okay, you come and do that for me, and I'll teach you marketing. And so it was this exchange of value. This thing that I think that was important about finding the mentorship was that there's something. It's mentorship has to be a relationship, then it's not really a relationship that's that valuable to the other person. And so, I would say in my search for mentorship, I found ways that I could help. And I found ways that I could help that person.
This happens a lot in hierarchical corporate structures, that typically people 2 levels below, 1 level below might have value to add, but they don't speak up, they'll ask. And they're like, I will be asked, or I'll be given an opportunity to provide value, otherwise I'll just follow directions. I think that is a very differentiator here, Michael, that everybody as a listener should think about whatever stage in your career you're at. If you have value to bring to the organization, it is appropriate to speak up and find ways to have your voice be heard, if it's in the best interest of the company. And that's when the value exchange starts to happen. And also having that clarity, that value exchange is up and down and up in all directions. And that's how you rise and when you behave with that mentality. So I think that is awesome. And then when org changes happen, new leaders come in, mergers and acquisitions happen, a lot of people just quiet down and hunker down. I think that's the opportunity for a lot of us to shine and share what value we can bring. So I that takeaway.
Sandy, it's the biggest jumps I've made in my career were exactly how you described it. Was 2 different situations where there was a change and somebody needed help with something, and I volunteered my time to be part of the discussion and demonstrated kind of my commitment to contributing to the effort, and then opportunities emerged.
That's why I was going to actually even add to that, because you mentioned she asked you, what would you be interested? And maybe it was because you were already mentoring together and you had reached out to her or whatnot. But for her to do that meant that she was confident in your skills and ability to deliver, which means, if we go even one step back, you were already had a very strong brand of when you did take on something, you were known to be a deliverer.
So it's interesting.
Is that fair?
Yeah, it is. You're James, you're exactly right to go back a step, because going back a step, she had asked me a number of questions about other strategic issues. And I had kind of offered my kind of help and advice in probably 2 or 3 other situations before that conversation even happened. And so, it was part of an ongoing conversation of me providing value to her that led to that moment where she said, hey, would you be interested? Could you help with? And so it wasn't like these things are never, it's never a once and done. So Sandy, I think your point on kind of the kind of the aha moment here is that it's not just a single time when you have something to add, but it's got to be almost a habit, like where you find places in as a person looking for more value to add, and do that on a regular basis. And that James, is I think what got me recognized, in that situation.
One other thing I'm excited about now, because the culture piece here, when you talk about great teams and great culture in a company, great culture comes from providing a safe space for all divergent thoughts to be voiced and things to be challenged. Everybody talks about it, but actually making that happen is very, very hard. I think a lot of it is top down, but I don't believe it's just top down, because in a room, we've had situations where there's a fresh graduate who's a creative graduate, and I'm telling my story here. We're presented to a big customer, final pitch, everybody's very happy with all the campaign content, everybody's bought in, and this young lady puts her hand up and says, "Sandy, I don't get it." And this is in front of the client. This is a room of 60 people. And my first reaction was, I just want to choke this person right now, right? Because, like, what are you doing? But I held myself back, covered my ego, and I said, yeah, what is it? And she was dead right. We were trying to convey a message, which everybody kind of believed because we were living in our echo chamber. But when you look outside, and this is a broad campaign covering all ages, all demographics, it was a quality product. And in that, if she didn't get it, we had to, because she was the audience too, right? But that is the kind of culture, especially when you have creatives, business consultants, technologists, and whether you're doing product, which is traditional or not, today everybody needs that convergence. But people don't encourage it. So what have you seen done well to encourage that culture, and what have you seen that takes away from it? Help our audience with examples here.
So it's a really hard thing to achieve, because it takes, a lack of ego from senior folks. It takes an amount of trust amongst team members in order to get to that place. But so there's a lot of things that you could talk about in terms of how to encourage psychological safety, which I won't go into, but those are necessary but not sufficient. I think one of the things that I have seen make a big change in how you can get that sort of diversity of thought and opinion into the conversation for kind of, I would say, outsized, kind of benefit is fundamentally changing the way of working. And I think, we talk about agile and, in all different ways. I think the principles of agile, the principles of agile, not the religion of agile, creates the conditions where this can happen, because there's a degree of involvement of all of the team members in the actual outcome. And so and when you rally people around a commercial outcome and they all feel like they are on the hook to deliver something that is meaningful and material, then you start to get, kind of these emergent properties from teams, which are driven and enhanced by both diversity and inclusive, cultures. I'll say one other thing. The sign for me that we aren't there yet is whenever anybody asks me for, kind of what's the intake process, or wants to create an intake process. Because that just means we are having a transactional relationship where I'm focused on the task that I need to get done, and we are not aligned around, even though we may have knowledge around it, we do not have the same level of accountability for the commercial outcome we're trying to drive. And that just means we are processing transactions, between groups, and not fully kind of aligned in terms of the accountability that we collectively have. And it's in that accountability that I think you can find what you're describing, Sandy.
I want to take it on a slightly different path here, because this is a very key topic for converging creative and business outcome, right? Creative people are makers, right? They take pride in what they make, and they get glory and joy in what they make and how beautiful it is and how much it's appreciated, which is absolutely necessary as part of the equation. And maybe sometimes what you're calling the commercial outcome needs to be redefined a little bit. And let me take a shot at what we've been trying to do, and I want to get your validation or contradiction to it. Eventually, whatever we make is for humans of some kind or the other, right? Whether it's our customers, our employee, our agents, our channel, all those humans have to be trusting that message and believing in it and engaging, right? That's essentially what we're trying to do, whether it's a product or it's a touch point, but all these touch points in the journey, right, have either trust or repulsion. You're moving away from it. Now, if we said desirability of that touch point is what we are measuring, and as more and more people desire what we are doing with them as a brand or an organization, that eventually will result in a business outcome. And that's why redefinition of success is the leading indicators or the leading metrics that we're watching are desirability of those touch points, which are properly measured scientifically, not because of a Hippo syndrome or a Picasso syndrome. By the way, in the maker's world, the Picasso syndrome is another big one, right? I'm a brilliant creator and I have created it, so thou shalt appreciate it after I die. But hello, we're here right now to love the painting now. So if you look at that philosophy then is another one I've seen the customers and creatives and teams in terms suddenly start to appreciate that is what we are measuring. Do you believe that has value? Because and the reason I say it is sometimes when you just tell the creative it's about a commercial outcome, it becomes cold and dry and soulless. If it is about getting human belief and emotion and connection, it has a little more warmth to it. I don't know if that's worked for you. I give your opinion on it.
It's interesting. So, and this is one of the reasons I love working at MetLife. When we think about commercial outcomes, because we're a commercial enterprise, we think about it across all the stakeholders. And so when we think about outcomes, and maybe it's more just linked to outcomes, we think about the outcomes for each of the stakeholders. That includes communities, it includes investors, it includes employees, it includes customers. And so we are, and it's not enough just to look at the leading indicator. It's the actual impact that we have on the outcomes for those groups. And so, the value that we deliver is measured by the outcomes that we deliver to all of our stakeholders. And I think if in this tension between creative and business, we should actually be really clear about how are you optimizing marketing, right? It's and so I shorthand it with commercial outcomes, but you make a really good point, Sandy, that we should be clear about the stakeholder and the outcomes that we're driving for them, and then use that as a mechanism for inspiration.
And maybe it's the means versus the end is what you and I were talking about, right? The means might be to get those touch points to work so that they stay with us and continue to get real value at every touch point, because eventually it's easy, enjoyable, useful. If that's being done at every stage, then they stay engaged. You start to lose that and it erodes. So value are compromised if you don't make it, easy and enjoyable sometimes.
Yeah. We look at our outcomes kind of from many different perspectives. When we think about the outcomes at MetLife here for our customers, we think about building remarkable and enduring customer relationships. And we have a set of measurements that we use to evaluate whether the relationships are remarkable and enduring. And so, what the creatives make has to contribute to the remarkable and enduring customer relationships. But we also have a set of, commitments, to our investors around, ROE and direct expense ratio, as well as growth. And we have to meet those outcomes as well. And so I think there's a lot of different ways to show it, but I think the clarity with which you can measure the outcomes for each of those stakeholders is super important. It's one of the reasons why we actually publish, 20, 30 goals around DE&I, 20, 30 goals around sustainability, so we can hold ourselves accountable for the outcomes we're driving for communities. We have,
more about the goals, by the way. I hear more about the D&I and sustainability goals, but I think James has a question before we.
Yeah. So Michael, I appreciate you going into the executive thought for CMO organizations and how to be successful there. I'm going to take it back to because I think there's so many nuggets with just how you navigated over to this other organization through a sponsorship. So I'm going to go there with best practices that you tried and maybe things that didn't work that you learned that you wouldn't do it because you went. So here's the context. You're a strategist. The CMO and you have built a rapport. She's like, I got an opportunity for you. She brings you into the marketing work. You're now an outsider. You have no domain expertise. You've got all these other, in all fairness, right? You've got all the other executives that are looking at you like competition, potentially. They're like, who's this guy? This is now the favorite of CMO. How did you navigate the dynamics of going into a whole nother team at an executive level where you're not like the person that talks the street, if you will? Because I think a lot of end up finding ourselves in situations where you have to build, influence friends and build allies. Like, how did you go about that?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. So, there's a lot of the classic kind of build relationships, build allies on the team, those sorts of things. In my situation, though, there was even a bigger problem than just the relationships and the newness of the organization. Is what you described, James. Is I knew nothing. Like, analytics, so that I could find someplace where I could add value, where there was something that the teams could respect me for. Because essentially I walk in without any respect. And every stupid thing I say, makes the respect go further down. And so that was a big piece of it. How did I do that? Essentially, I built a network of experts both within and outside the company, and went and nurtured that network of experts. And again, back to the points we were making before about networking, I had to go figure out how I was going to provide value to them, right? It wasn't just taking. It wasn't going, give me a briefing on how, marketing automation works or something like that. It was, okay, so look, I think I have something to offer. I'd love to learn this from you. And then, that initial exchange happened where we found something that we could collaborate on, and I could learn from them. They could learn from me in some way. And that started a set of relationships, many of which I have to this day, and many of which are still the people I call when I have a hard question, and they pick up the phone.
If I may, by the way, I just want to add a comment there. I think even though you always believe that there should be a value exchange, I do believe just the vulnerability and sincere asking for help is an awesome trait by itself, because people don't even do that. And most people are willing to help others if they know there's sincerity in wanting to learn, and there's sincerity in acknowledging that, hey, if you teach me, it'll help my organization and it'll help us grow together. Human beings in general are kind and open to helping, but some of us just don't get to be comfortable enough to be vulnerable and ask for it. So that itself, I think, is a learning as well.
Michael, and to Sandy, your point, but to Michael, I want to call out, don't over-index on building or limiting yourself to subject matter experts within the company. Like, I find that once you join, let's say, in my case, a Microsoft or a Google, your only access to experts is in that walled garden. And you prove that that's not the case. I love that.
Yeah, it is.
By the way, just the aha here. The way it works in the human network, we're trying to imitate that in the artificial intelligence world today. If your data scientists are only the ones limited to your company, your model and its accuracy is never going to work in the ecosystem. So, hey, in the real world also, it's the same, right?
Yeah, it really is. It really is.
So, look, I know we want to be respectful of your time, Michael. I think you only have 5 minutes left. Normally what we do at the end is we ask for, your take on the future of marketing, right? And what does that look like? It very concise. What is, especially with the invention of ChatGPT, generative AI is very hot. You probably had to think about how you want to incorporate those elements into your organization. So the floor is yours. What is your take? What the future look like for marketing in your opinion?
Yeah. So it's you saved the hard question for last. It's just like
That needs a little part too.
Yeah. No, it's a really important question, particularly right now, because we're all trying to figure this thing out. The pressure is on for marketers to have an answer to this question right now, but it's also the opportunity for marketers to have an answer to this question because I think in marketing and in customer experience, AI is going to have a profound impact.
Yeah.
And it has been, we have dabbled as marketers with AI in pockets, but with some great success and some great examples of AI, being effective, kind of in pockets. I think the future of marketing is AI across the entire customer journey. Like instead of in the one or two places where we see that we have an opportunity to do some kind of more advanced testing with, kind of automated multi-arm bandits or whatever it is, it's going to touch every single, both offline and online part of the customer journey. And I think the future of marketing is models connected to execution platforms, and those models connected across execution platforms. And so whether it's, one model across two platforms or models handing off from one part of the experience to the other, the AI capability, that is going to be the future for marketers.
I know we're getting even closer on time. I
would love, Michael, for you to kind of have any things you would want people to know more about you, any plug on MetLife, your personal missions you care about.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things I'm most proud of, of what I've been involved in at MetLife is our commitment to making the workplace more human. We have the largest group benefits business in the, kind of in the country, and we touch a lot of employees across industries and across socioeconomic status. And our most recent research around our employee benefits trend study really takes a look at what makes holistic health in the workplace, which drives productivity and retention, and employee satisfaction and happiness. And what we found was that a concept of employee care and the responsibility that corporations can take on in caring for their employees is something that can actually drive significant business outcomes and outcomes for employees. And so I'm really proud of that piece of research and how we are kind of trying to make a change kind of in the world based on things like that at MetLife. It's one example, but it's one of the things that I'm really proud of here at MetLife.
Michael, thank you so much for being such a good sport with the technical difficulties, with audio back and forth, standing up for me, knowing that it wasn't my headphones, but it was standing on the side. And taking time out of your Friday to meet with us through this. Let's work. When we post, we'll make sure we include all your links of what you got going on. I'm your host, James Archiri.
I'm your host, Sadi Sharma. Thank you, Michael, for being with us. So until next time,